it's cool to see that actually a few people showed up. That's nice. So I assume some of you are. I know that some of you are testers. So I was gonna start with: are you still playing the alpha? If so, why? If not, why? And if nobody wants to say anything to that, we can move on to the next order of business. But yeah, I'd like to know, because we're kind of in a situation where we can't really see the activity of all players. Especially, it appears that some people have grouped in private groups in the chat, and we can't spy on you as much as we'd like to. So we don't actually know what you're doing. And hey, come on, that's like we're reverse Facebook, so that's only good on us, right?
Yeah, we 100% GDPR compliant, so we don't know nothing.
See,
that's a good thing.
I keep getting
maybe
achievements.
I can tell a little story. Just in the game, we had one player who maxed out his base. Never would have thought that it is possible in the alpha, but apparently Land has managed to max out everything.
And that's fascinating, because it's not a player we've seen a lot of in the chat or in the forums, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly why we need those admin tools, just so we can get statistics to see which players are online, how long they are online, and yeah, we don't have that yet.
Yeah, but yeah, that's exactly it. Because there's this shadow community of not thousands of people, we would have known, but people still playing the alpha, although it's been running for a while. And we just don't know, because the chat seems kind of dead right now, the public chat. But I've heard that people are chatting in private.
Yeah, a lot.
So let me see if anybody's writing anything. Not yet. Wait, let me open up the forum as well. No, nobody's writing anything. Come on, guys. Don't be shy. Where's the user list? It's getting more and more, but all of them are quiet. Okay. Well, the thing is, we're at a point where we want to see if we can add more, more mid and late game content. And we were wondering what keeps you playing right now, because we mainly got like early game setup content and the basics of trade. But we want to, know, especially if you stop playing, what it is that would, kept your interest longer, or that you'd like to see in the next test. Also, we've been running 5 tests, and all of them kind of checked out how the early game setup worked and how that can be balanced and all. But we were considering changing it up for next time, and maybe like providing the players with a lot more to start with, so we can jump in at a later point. So it's like mid-game from the start, because that's something we've never actually tested, and that's something we would like to try out, maybe, if you guys think that makes sense. And if you do, or if you don't, shoot us a message. I'm not sure if I can actually see the live chat. Give me a second. Oh, no, wait.
Yeah, I think one of the first steps into mid-game content is probably what Martin is working on with the corporations. Maybe you can say a word or two what we're going to expect for the next test.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, as Julian already hinted at, the parts that we have finished now are the foundation of the game. So you can produce stuff, you can trade stuff, you can transport stuff. So that's the core and the foundation for everything else. And in our imagination, the actual the thing that will make the game fun and interesting in the long run is the meta game that happens on a more higher level. And the first step towards that will be corporations. And corporations are essentially what our equivalent of clans or alliances or guilds, whatever you call them in other online games. And the very, very first step for this feature will be the founding of these corporations in itself, of course. Then those corporations will, of course, have an internal chat room only for members. And then once that is done, like the boring member management stuff, basically, we'll continually add new features to them. So one of the first things that we have in mind, which will be like technically our first mid-game feature, really, will be building the headquarters of the corporation, which will allow the corporation to use all the other functionality that they provide. But that's going to be the first real challenge that the corporation as a whole, with all its members, has to overcome to actually progress in the game. So the corporation itself is merely a shell, like a loose group of players that offers a few private communication features, but not much beyond that, unless you provide the respective infrastructure, which will be costly, of course.
Metabeam is asking about the benefits. So in terms of mechanics, is that more like, do you have advantages in terms of trading among each other or stuff like that?
Yes and no. I mean, first of all, the corporations will be a requirement to use certain features of the game. Most importantly, the whole conflict and dominance system that we'll have planned for the later mid, early end game phase of the game. But of course, there might be some like smaller player-to-player features within a corporation that you only have as a member and not outside of a corporation. But what exactly those will be is not quite decided yet.
Metabeam writes requirement. Does this mean that there will be NPC corporation alternatives?
We haven't thought about that yet, but probably not.
What does it mean?
Prosperous Universe is all about collaborating with other real players and not so much NPCs, so probably not.
He means that, like, if there aren't enough players, for when the player count is low or solo players. We hope the player count won't be as low, so it doesn't come to that.
So and I think the player count problem won't be a problem. I mean, if the player count problem is a problem, then the game itself in general has a problem. We probably should be doing something else. But for solo players, of course, solo players will always have something to do without corporation. I mean, corporations explicitly provide features that are required for especially military interactions between players and corporations. So if you don't join a corporation, that kind of means that you like double opt out of any military conflict, because you will not, first of all, you will never directly be affected by any military conflict as a player. Like corporation structures can be affected by a military conflict, but your private structures like your production lines and ships and stuff can't. Only corporation structures can be affected, and if you don't join a corporation, you're just not part of that in the game. Basically, for solo players, a certain set of features will not be available. Yes, that's something that's true, I would say.
But corporations are, beside military, are also about like erecting like those mega structures on planets and all, like universities and things like that provide bonuses or modifiers or stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, corporations do have civil features, and they're not all about war. And we have yet to discuss which parts of that could also be available to non-corporation players. I mean, in theory, you could always found a one-person corporation. There's nothing like technically against that. It's just that most likely you will not be able to, or not willing to, come up with the resources you need to provide the kind of infrastructure by yourself. We're talking about planetary infrastructure projects.
Yeah.
One of the first examples that come to mind are the commodity exchanges. We have commodity exchanges right from the beginning, and they are owned by the factions, and they are basically what they are right now on the starting worlds. But sooner than later, I guess players want to have their own commodity exchanges that are further in the deep space or in unexplored areas. And those are completely player-driven, and only corporations can build these commodity exchanges. And of course, the benefit of running such a commodity exchange is you can have taxes and what else, Martin? You can
basically trading fees, and also you can decide which materials are actually tradable. So I don't imagine the public commodity exchanges to ever trade military equipment, for example. It's just not something that you will be able to trade on a public exchange. But I see Matterbeam has asked a few more questions about the corporation, so I'll just
bring that up.
I'll just try to answer those really quick. So military interaction, the whole idea in Prosperous Universe, I've already briefly touched on that, is that first and foremost, for a normal player, the game is non-violent. That means it's a business simulation game, and your primary activity in the game is doing business. The military interaction will happen between corporations and as part of the so-called dominance feature. So that's our working title, so to speak. And what that basically means is that corporations can establish infrastructure on planets or in systems that allow them to exert a certain amount of control over these planets. For example, they can raise taxes, they can set certain rules, stuff like that. And these corporation structures, they can be the target of other corporations in a military sense. So you can assemble a force and try to take those structures from another corporation. So if you're a player on that planet, you have a production line there, you're not directly affected by this military conflict because your production lines, for example, will never get hurt. But at the same time, of course, if the corporation that controls that planet changes after a military conflict, then, for example, your taxes or fee structures or whatever might change. So you might have an interest in a certain corporation being the victor in that conflict. What the exact military conflict system will look like isn't quite specced out yet. But one thing that's for sure is it's going to be a very costly, very logistically challenging feature. So actually assembling such a force and then sending it somewhere, supplying it there with munitions, with food, with fuel, whatever you need for a military operation, all that will be quite a challenge for players. So it's definitely a big, complex feature, the way we envision it at the moment.
So it's one of the big resource sinks, and it needs to have some kind of high reward if it's got this high cost as well. But one thing that we got asked a lot at the exhibitions was people brought up O-Game a lot and said, like, if I don't log into O-Game for a day or two, my base gets destroyed. And is that possible in Prosperous Universe? And that is definitely not possible because, as Martin said earlier, you're only indirectly affected by military. You cannot just be raided by some superior force who takes away all your stuff and destroys, lays waste to your base. And the other points on corporations, will there be noob corps already in place for when the game launches? If I know no one, how do I access the entire game? My personal hope is that people will be advertising for you to join their corporation, as they do in other MMOs, where they put up literal billboards in the virtual world, because people are stronger together. So I think we have to incentivize corporations trying to recruit new members all the time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going, especially if there's a certain amount of features that are only available to members of corporations. I think every new player, after they have learned the ropes, will have a vested interest in joining a corporation. And if that, for many players, that might actually mean founding one of their own. So I imagine that. So I imagine there's going to be basically like there might actually be a public channel just for that purpose, looking for cooperation or whatever. We were. I mean, in its core, the philosophy of Prosperous Universe is that of a sandbox in the strictest sense of the word. So, like just like NPCs, us providing the player with a noob corporation is not something that we would like to do. It must be something that comes from the players.
All right. Let me just check real quick if we got. Nope, Discord is not asking anything. So let's just continue here with MetaBeam's questions. How do you prevent commodities falling to the bare minimum cost of production price? Near zero profit margin, only the largest corps can play with the markets. That's a very good question.
We don't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's it's a market. It's a business simulation game after all, and there is supply and demand. And if the price of some material drops so low that you cannot make a profit off of it, then you have to stop producing it. Simple as that. And in classic market theory, that would mean that less people produce it, the supply goes down, and the prices go up eventually. Also, I mean, you're probably especially thinking about smaller players or new players. Of course, if you're someone just coming into the game, you can of course profit from these near zero profit margin prices because you might not be able to make a profit by selling them, but you might be able to make a profit by buying them and then producing something that actually creates a profit margin for you. So I mean that might sound harsh, but it is a business simulation game after all. So
that means two things to me personally. I think players down the line need to have some way of having a look at the market before they set up their company. So right now you can just only see the contents of the game when you already have an account, already picked your faction and your starting package. By doing so before you actually see the market, there's no way of knowing if you're going to have a viable business, right? And the other thing is there even a way?
When you start out at one planet, you don't have to build your base at that planet. You can take your ship and just fly somewhere else. And there will be probably all the time opportunities to make a living for every starting package you chose. So
you mean even though I'm stuck with experts in a field that's currently overcrowded, I still have a fighting chance of going somewhere else?
Yeah, with the same experts, yeah.
Okay.
Probably.
And the other question that's kind of implied in the bare minimum cost of production price thing, is there a way to minimize production costs at all? I mean, we don't have different qualities of commodities, right? No, like super leather and normal leather. So we can sell the super leather at a super high price and the normal leather at a super low price. So is there even a margin? Because right now, if you produce a product, you have a certain amount of workers that work during that production cycle, and they have a fixed upkeep of rations and water.
Right.
So you can't really optimize the price and have it lower just because you've been in the game for longer than the others, right?
Well, you can buy cheaper. For example, if you have a friend in a corporation and they produce a raw product much cheaper than you would get it directly in the market, that could lower your production price and raise your profit, for example.
Okay.
And of course, we have the expert system. So over time, you will get more and more experts in a certain field, and you can build buildings that increase the amount of expert you can use. So over time, you will get better and better at producing commodity.
Yeah. Okay. But then again, we have systems that work against that, right? Like depreciation of buildings. So if you have a building for longer, it like increases in upkeep, or at least it has like recurring costs.
I mean, any building that you operate or any production line that you operate has a mix of costs associated with it. I mean, first of all, you have your fully dynamic costs for the input materials that you need. Like the only exception to that is actually extracting resources, because they obviously you dig them out of the ground. But even in these cases, the corporation dominating that planet might have decided, hey, you know what? We have an extraction tax or something. So for every unit of resources you dig out of the ground, you have to pay a certain amount to them. But then you also have, for example, other taxes that might be might be raised in general on production. So for every time you run your production line, you have to pay a certain amount to the ruling faction or the ruling corporation. Then, of course, the buildings, that's not implemented just yet, but will be eventually. Buildings will depreciate over time. So the longer you run a building, the less efficient it gets. That's basically our way of ensuring that someone who has been playing the game for a long time, they will become less efficient. The bigger, not the bigger necessarily, but the longer they've been in the game, the less efficient they become. Unless they replace their production lines. Also, that would mean that a production line at some point will break down. So if a player doesn't actively replace it, it will vanish. And then, yeah, I think that's about the cost components to a production line that we have right now.
That keep a certain minimum level of cost for a product that like. So you can't fall below a certain price if you want to sell it for profit. Let me skip. Jimmy Muff is writing, I'm more worried about hyperinflation. MMORPGs with own currency usually fight with this problem that makes it very difficult for new player to start. I'm not sure if we have a problem with inflation because we don't get that much new currency into the game. As it's just the starting money of players that gets into the game. It's not like World of Warcraft where every mob drops gold and everybody keeps printing money. On the contrary, in Prosperous Universe, we have sort of the opposite problem, right? Because everybody keeps printing resources at a fairly steady pace of incoming money.
Yeah, that's right. And this is something we have to monitor very, very carefully. We are not doing that right now in the alpha test that is currently running, but that's a very fair point. And yeah, I guess we have to invent some tooling for that, so that we, as the admins of the game, can see how the prices develop and the prices for currency. And how much player have how the money is distributed among the players. That's a problem I worry about. Like just in real life, like 1% of the people have like 70% of all money, and of course that's something we have to monitor closely.
Yeah, I mean the most important part of that will be to offer them even bigger and always larger and more massive sinks for resources. I mean, that's going to be the only way to deal with this problem.
That's actually, I think that it instantly addresses what Metabeam just wrote. If you're continuously mining resources, you need outlets for those resources. So you mean, how do they get out of the game again? And I mean, we got some mechanics that we just talked about, but I hope war is going to destroy many of them.
I mean, essentially, there are three, depending on how you count. I mean, one is that the war. I mean, we are a sci-fi game, but we still haven't quite abolished labor yet. So all your facilities only run when they have staff, and you don't actually pay your staff, but you have to provide for them in material, so to speak. So that is the sink number one, that every population actually consumes certain goods. That's so they vanish every time they consume them. The other one is basically when you build ships or buildings, At the moment, we don't plan to make buildings tradable. So that means you build them once, and then they depreciate over time, and at some point vanish. So that is a source as well, especially in the later stages of the game where you have large and very expensive buildings. These obviously will probably end up being pretty big resource sinks. But then, of course, one of the prime reasons we do have war in the game, despite it being a business simulation game and with a strong emphasis on peace or peaceful interaction, war is going to be the top sink of resources. I mean, this, as in most other games, this will be the prime function of military conflict from a game design perspective, of course.
Yep. Yeah, and then there's like resources. In the current test, I'm pretty much bankrupt because I tried to go into the copper business, and some of it is just number tweaking right now because if like we realize that not as many people need it, like I produced copper for I think 5 years worth of this current test setup, so we're gonna have to tweak the numbers on that a lot, like. If I just output 1/10 of that, all of it would have been bought, and I could have sold it at a much higher price. So, yeah, that's part of what we're testing right now. So how much we can produce sensibly of which resources. There were a couple more questions that we skipped in the meantime. On combat, I don't know if we have much of that combat system fleshed out, do we? So
no,
like
no.
how
We have
does
some
the player
rough
make
ideas.
decisions? Okay. On the economy, how many transformation features do you have? If I extract product A, is it always more worthwhile to sell it on the market than to transform it into B, C, D, and so on? Do you have production chains that incentivize developing planets and infrastructure instead of just going for volume?
Yes, absolutely. I'd say so. For starters, you cannot say beforehand if selling product A is more it has more profit in it than transforming it into other products, because we expect the markets to be extremely dependent on location. So if you have, for example, Julian's copper producing company somewhere, then copper will be probably at a lower price in the region of where he sells it than somewhere else. So for him, it would be probably cheaper just to sell it, and it would be more profits just to sell it instead of transforming it. But someone else who is living somewhere else in another region might actually use the copper to produce all kind of computer stuff, for example, and sell that. And there's more profit in there for him. That totally depends on each commodity, and we cannot say beforehand. But there are definitely productive production chains. Yeah.
And Metabeam also asks, is there a research tree?
Not really.
There's a commodity tree.
Yeah. I mean, there's no research in the classic sense in Prosperous Universe, so you don't have to research anything to do anything. I mean, in other games, a lot of features depend on you researching something with some kind of research currency or whatever. We don't have that in Prosperous Universe. It's not planned to have that, so we don't have a classic research tree. What we have is the commodity tree, or I tend to prefer to call it commodity mesh because it's becoming so complex. Yeah, that basically answers the question, I think.
Yeah, and I guess if you could see the whole mesh of products and commodities we have as something that the player has to research and find the spot where he wants to produce something. But it's not research as in other games. And for your next question, Metabeam, no, you don't have to unlock blueprints to start a production chain. You have just to have that building. And having that building to produce a good can be complicated because the building can be expensive because you need some raw products to build the building, or you have to feed the population that is there as a workforce. So you cannot instantly start in every production chain, but if you have the resources, you can do that.
Yeah, the thing is, because some of the higher, like the more specialized buildings are more expensive, and their workforce has a much higher upkeep. It can be tough or impossible with your starting money to just jump in where you like, essentially. Did I miss a very important secret unveiling? Yeah, we were all naked in the beginning. You missed that, so. But I would think we're recording the stream, so you can catch up. Hey, Eden Fighter, hello, welcome.
Okay, what's the end game content?
Yeah,
that's a good question, and we're working on it. But probably it won't be content like in other games. It's more of, I think of the end game more of a political game. So you have your corporation, maybe you have friends in other corporations, and somehow you make up your own goal, like owning a certain area, or being the best in a certain area in the market, selling certain commodities. And I guess that's all up to the players, and we just try to find game mechanics that we can add later to the game that will add to the end game itself. And if you're interested, I think on our website there is the feature roadmap, and there are lots of end game content visions we have, and then that we want to implement at one day, and that's all end game content.
I mean, there might be some events or special end game features that we provide to players. So one thing actually that's Michi's idea, I think, is to maybe if the universe at one point becomes too crowded, there might be some kind of big special event that requires something of the advanced corporations to actually unlock a new area in the game world to create basically new space. That would be one option. Or what I could think of as an end game feature would be huge construction projects like Dyson spheres or whatever. I mean, in the realms of sci-fi, I think there is plenty of cool things that could be exploited for end game content in Prosperous Universe.
Yeah, and when I'm talking about politics, it's not like staged politics where you have a button and now you become the leader of something or stuff like that. It's up to the players. They have to organize themselves. We just give them guidelines with the corporations and maybe alliances if that is something the player wants at a later stage. And they have to organize themselves.
Exploration, is it a feature in the game? Does it provide any other benefits than opening up worlds to build stuff on? That's your thing, Michi, right?
Yeah, exploration, it's not yet in the game. Right now you can see the resources and every planet there is. You can just click it and you get all the information there is. But we want to change that, especially it seems.
I'm totally for it. Don't worry.
Yeah, me too, man. I want to see one of those information selling dudes that just scan the fringes of the known universe. That's so cool.
Yeah, that's what I want to have. Like, you could totally be. I want that there's the possibility that you can be an explorer and have specialized ships with equipment on them, and to just go to the fringes of space, scan down everything, find asteroids, planets, stuff like that, and sell that information to the highest bidder. And then they can form mining outposts or decide to set up their corporation base there, or what. I don't know what they want to do, but stuff like that. Yeah. And the ultimate goal is when they there are so many players that the universe is getting small, then we want to give the ability to the players to find new regions of space. And that is what kind of these mega projects Martin mentioned is all about. So, yeah, corporations will have to work together to buy, I don't know what, it's not fleshed out yet, like to build jump gates, and then the new area of space will be available. Hello, cat.
Yeah, cat on keyboard, sorry.
Okay, great. I think that was all the questions we've had so far. Oh no, there was one that was kind of overlooked in the meantime. Travel times, how long would it take a player to cross the map? Well, that really depends on your fuel usage. Between the system where I'm located right now and Promitor, it takes like 6 days or something at minimum fuel usage. So I think that you can already take like 2 weeks to fly across the universe we have now, and it's like that's just the one we're starting with, right?
Yeah. So travel distances and times from one side of the universe to the other, they will be quite intense, I think, which is also a requirement to actually have spatial separation between markets and to also allow for a worthwhile differentiation between different ship types, for example. So there could be like this huge, slow freighter that can haul huge amounts of ore, for example, but is super slow and takes 2 weeks to get somewhere. And you could build a sprinter, basically, the Millennium Falcon or whatever, that can transport a very, very small, lightweight load, but is super fast. So
a Razorback.
That is like for a courier shipment, I guess. Yeah. If you want to send a letter somewhere.
And there could even be ships that won't have faster than light capabilities, so they can only operate in one single system. That's also possible.
Oh. Yeah, of course, the Expanse fans.
I'm in book number 7 right now, but I don't have enough time to finish reading it.
Yeah, I'm also in the latest book, somewhere in the middle. Okay, so that's... we can combine exploration with mega projects, build wormholes to connect two systems of the player's choosing. Yeah, I mean...
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm more thinking like portals, not so much wormholes, but...
Yeah, same.
Technically the same thing, right? I guess.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes. So, we got nothing new here.
The first step there is, isn't the hard part of building something like a wormhole or like a portal that you first have to get to the other side, in my understanding? So maybe you have to build like a huge generation ship that then travels for several months and arrives somewhere. And then you can to build the other side of the portal. Just an idea.
We got a new question. As long as I played the game, there was no thing where it benefits you if you invest much of playtime. You're always waiting for productions to finish. Will this change? So like mining in EVE Online, it's not a game-changing mechanic, but rewards you if you invest more playtime into the game. It's funny because we had this discussion like today or yesterday for a brief time when I was like, we have no grind in the game because you have none of those repetitions, repetitions, like you have to like click the cookie or slay the mob or readjust your lasers to different asteroids, like things that are busy work and that in my opinion aren't really fun. So in EVE you have like mining, but with us it's just queue the order, wait for it to finish, and workers do it for you. Is there going to be more things where more time investment gets you more profit, apart from the social aspects?
Not directly, I'd say. I mean,
Martin, go ahead.
The original idea for the game was that it is something that you do on the side and that requires minimum interaction. I mean, that was one of the, originally at least, one of the key goals for the game, that for example, if you have your morning coffee in the morning, you check out your game really quick, then you go for work, and then you check it again in lunchtime or something, and you don't actually have to spend time constantly to do something. On the other hand, indirectly, of course, you can invest as much time as you want and do your research, so to speak. I mean, I'm pretty sure. I mean, you already mentioned and excluded the social aspects, which of course can take as much time as you would like.
Exactly.
But there's also, I think, a lot of soft activities that you can do, like monitoring the markets or stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's what I do all the time. Trying to find the cheapest price. Changing my orders to get more profit.
Yeah. I mean, there I think you would definitely benefit from investing more time. But it's not like we have this feature in the game where you basically click a button, and because you click that button, you get something in return. That's below our standards.
I think something that people often misjudge when they first see the game, there was something that many people said at the fairs where we exhibited in the last couple of weeks was, I don't think I have time for this game. And I was always like, dude, you can play this as casually as you want. Like, I log in 5 minutes a day, queue my orders, and check if anything got sold, maybe adjust the prices, maybe see if my send a spaceship on the way, and then I log out again. So but then there are players who, like, within minutes of a new server start crunching Excel sheets for the rest of the day and really get into it and make a business plan and all that. That's not things you do in the game, but those are ways you can spend time optimizing for what you do in the game. So I think that's more the kind of gameplay that can keep you busy right now, at least.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm gonna go through our list here since I think we've been through all the questions for now. We're already doing the open Q&A session. But now that some people have warmed up to it, maybe I'm gonna get back to my initial question. To those who are still playing, what are you doing? And to those who dropped out, why did you drop out? Those are to me, two important questions right now. To those who didn't join us in the beginning, to reiterate, we can't really monitor what you're doing in the game. So we can basically see what you all can see, like the market and the public chats. But other than that, we don't know what you're all up to. We've noticed that some people are still playing, and we were surprised to see that some people are super active that aren't that visible in the I'm buying gold. All right. What's the stat? Are you guys moving on to on new planets, higher tiers of buildings, or are you just producing stuff en masse?
I mean, before just a quick interlude, before people think we're idiots, I'll gladly do a more technical live stream at some point in the future where we can talk about why we see so little of what people doing in the game right now, because that's not maybe that sounds a bit unintuitive to users who might be familiar with the technology behind web games a little bit and think, why you have a database, just run a few queries and you see what's going on. It's not quite that simple with the kind of architecture we run Prosperous Universe on, but that is a topic for a whole different event, I think.
In truth, it's just our concern for your privacy.
Of course, which is anyway. There's questions.
Yeah, will there be ways to export data, for example, to Excel or an API for apps and custom programs?
So the API is actually on the feature roadmap. So like on the website, it already mentions that, although at the very end of the list. So it might take a while until we get to that.
But we want to do complementary apps, or how's it called?
Companion apps.
Companion apps. Yeah, we want to do that. And if we build the API for it, then we'll probably make it public at some point.
Yeah. And Excel, I don't know, maybe. Not right now. It's a soul-drenching activity to write features like that, and we really need to, I think, first get some meat on the bone when it comes to actual gameplay. And having features like an Excel export is nice and all, but let's say it's not our top priority at the moment.
Speaking of yay text stream +1, you guys can follow us by hitting that heart up there and then turn on notifications and see when we go online again, because I think this is getting received pretty well, and we might do another of these, maybe more technical, maybe something else in terms of the format, but if it all goes well, this won't be the last you see of us on Twitch, so feel free to hit that follow button. Just advertisement over. Okay. Well, you're not really going that much into detail about my question.
No one wants to answer your question.
Nobody wants to answer my question. That's okay. Then I'll just ask another question. Because I feel like communication is a bit spread out right now. We have a Discord channel where very little happens, like only when we start a new server maybe, and we have a forum that is fairly active. We have an in-game chat that sort of sucks activity out of all the other channels. We have a newsletter and all this kind of stuff. We even have a subreddit we don't really use. So if any of you have an opinion on this subject, which are your preferred communication channels? That's important for me to know because I'm supposed to communicate with you guys, and I feel like Discord is kind of dead. Is it? But for me, it's kind of the same. I'm not really active in 20 of the 22 Discord channels I'm in because everybody has one right now, and I get notifications piling up that are never ever open, and I'm kind of afraid that our Discord is the same to many of you, and that the forum is the only actual place where you swing by from time to time. So not necessarily something you need to give feedback now, but something I'm really interested in and want to bring up. Forum or in-game? Yeah, that's what I thought. And in-game, most people have in the meantime switched to private communication channels, from what I've gathered. I have some private channels
because we know nothing.
Yeah. But there are at least 2 or 3 close groups that are closely working together in the game, and they communicate in private channels.
Yeah. Check Discord more often than in-game nowadays. Yeah. Okay.
It's probably a very different situation depending on who you ask. I mean, people that are actually still in the game would probably use the in-game chat because it's kind of natural to use it.
Sure.
And it's actually quite a great problem to have for us as game developers that people are actually using the in-game chat. I mean, it's a pretty cool thing. On the other hand, anyone who's not in the game right now obviously will probably be more interested in other channels.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you just use it to keep up to date right now, there's nothing wrong with that, because I mainly use Discord for announcements these days. But yeah, exactly. We don't really get discussions going, which is also fine because right now there's not much to discuss. The alpha is just running along. But I think this stream format is really nice for this kind of thing. We get like more talk in less time here.
I would really like to discuss the turn the Expanse has taken in the 7th book, but I'm afraid it would spoiler it to too many people, so we can't talk about it.
Yeah. Is there a spoilers function in our forum?
I think so. I think there is.
Maybe we could use that then.
It's weird.
Right now, we need to spam the petition everywhere because they canceled it, and I want Amazon or anybody to pick it up. I've been spamming my friends with it too. So anyway, I think that's essentially it. We touched on everything that we had in our list for the stream, and it's almost been an hour. So is there anything else you guys like to talk about? Anything you'd like to add? Let me just check all the other channels too. Nope. All right. Yeah, so if this is something you guys enjoy, talking to us directly, I mean, we are quite active communicating stuff in our weekly devlog, but yeah, I like this less, communication with less slight delay. Oh, one more question. Could you tell us what is currently in the alpha test when the new one starts? So you mean what's in the next alpha, I suppose?
I mean, what's definitely going to be in the next one is what Michi has been working on for weeks now. That's the new flight model, the new flight interface, takeoff and landing segments, cool new stuff.
Space stations, maybe.
Yeah, space stations might end up in the next alpha version. From my side, obviously, I hope to have the corporations ready, or let's say I'm not hoping. I would say the next alpha won't start before we don't have the corporation feature in.
Mm-hmm. And I think there will be a major change to the tech tree or to the material mesh we have right now, and probably more commodities, more products.
Yeah. We're just only getting started on the whole commodity tree design work, so expect that to change a lot in the upcoming tests. I would bet that the tree will look very, very different the next time around. But let's see.
Yeah, I just posted a quick preview of the upcoming flight control. That we just posted today in the devlog, so that's something you can expect in the next alpha test.
We won't make any promises on when the alpha test is going to start.
We're not guessing. We're not promising nothing. No, it's we also have a few what do you call it? Scheduling uncertainties coming up. So at the moment, it's really hard for us to tell when the new alpha test is going to happen. But just like a word of caution, you probably have to be a bit patient.
Yeah. But one thing that we also encountered when exhibiting the game like live was that I feel like people think, oh my god, an MMO made by a couple of indie guys is really ambitious, and you might be afraid that it's just that updates are gonna stop and we're just gonna disappear or something like that. That's definitely not gonna happen. We have steady funding and we are working constantly. It's just it just takes a while because we're very few people, but everything will happen eventually. That's actually a luxurious position for an indie studio to be in, but it's the case for us. So don't worry. Just we can't make any promises regarding the timeline.
Don't believe anything he says.
We'll just take all your money you gave us for the alpha, and then we'll run.
Wait. They haven't given us any money, have they?
I haven't received any money.
Yeah.
I have to take care of something. Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for stopping by and asking questions. The stream will be available in one form or another. It's set to stay on Twitch for like 2 weeks, but I think I'd rather you move it to our YouTube channel, and I'll post a link in the forum. So you can look things up and tell other people if you want. And if you like this, I hope I liked it. Well, maybe we can do another one sometime.
Yeah, me too. Sounds as if we need to talk about the technical side of things, and that's one thing I am looking forward to.